can see me well, and this is just such a special evening, and I'm just so honored that our guest Sarah McBride, who is running for the Delaware State Senate, did I get that correct? Is joining us, on the campaign trail, well, the virtual campaign trail, should I say, right? That's a little different, but so Sarah, it's really our honor for you to be here, and just the history in the making that you're doing is just to be admired, and so honored that you can be with us. So welcome, Sarah McBride, all the way from Wilmington, Delaware. So how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this, to see some old friends, to join some old friends. I was with so many of you in Palm Springs a few years ago. I've been in touch with many of you since then, seen a few of you since then. And so it's great to be on. I wish we could be in person together.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, the nice thing about this format is we're able to bring folks in who from all over the country. And so I'm really excited to be back with you all and to celebrate this new wonderful organization with you all.
Thank you, Sarah. There's so many, I mean, you've got the best of the best in the real estate arena, involved with the Alliance, and just, as we were in lockdown and then the summer happened and things got so busy in the real estate world, and the fact that we had all these dedicated commercials around the country involved in developing this alliance just shows you their dedication. And so I'm honored to be part of this. I'm honored to be president of this organization. I'm honored to work with Ryan and David, and we just got a great group of people in our board, and I'm just so excited. So I know we don't have a lot of time, and you've got a lot going on. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna put my interview hat on, right, and kind of go for it, right? So no, I've got several questions for you that I'm just so curious to hear about. But the first is, why did you decide to run, and how did you prepare for the excitement, the challenges, opportunities that will come being a transgender, woman running for office?
I'm just turning on the extra light because it's getting a little dark.
Yeah.
I decided to run for a few reasons. One, I'm running for state Senate here in Delaware in a district that is the district that actually Joe Biden grew up in. He grew up in the northern part of this district, and it's the district that I grew up in. I grew up in the southern part of this district. We grew up a couple decades apart, but it's a wonderful community. In many ways, it's the community that helped not only raise me, but the community that helped shape me into the person that I am. It's a community that's been by my side for some really difficult challenges, I shared with so many of you in various settings, from not only coming out and fighting for my rights here in Delaware, but also the loss of my husband, Andy. And so this is a community that I've seen at its best. I've seen us demonstrate the values of kindness and care, but I've also seen when we fall short. And I've seen that far too many of our neighbors still feel left behind here in this district. And Delaware is a small state. I like to call us a state of neighbors. And I think that we can do more to fully live up to those values as a state of neighbors, to fully live up to that moniker. I also decided to run because despite how negative and toxic national politics are, despite the gridlock we see at the national level, frankly, that we'll see regardless in many ways of who wins the presidency, I'm actually still as optimistic as I've ever been that change is possible. And that's in large part because of the experiences I've had within the LGBTQ community and the LGBTQ movement. I'm not running as a trans candidate, but I'm certainly informed by my experiences as an advocate and by my experiences as a member of this community. And those experiences and the lessons learned from those times and from that work has reinforced for me that change is possible, that politics at its best is not the art of the possible, but the art of transforming impossibility into possibility into reality. And so it's with that inspiration that I've received from our community and from our movement, that I decided that politics is still worth it, that our democracy is worth fighting for, and that we can still make big things happen so long as we have the courage to act and the ability to build bridges. And so I decided to run for the Delaware State Senate because I love this community. I want to give back to this community, but because I am incredibly hopeful about our capacity to meet the challenges we face with big ideas and meaningful results. And to the second part of your question about the sort of challenges and opportunities that come with running and come with running as a trans candidate. What this campaign has reinforced for me, which I've known my entire life, is that my neighbors are fundamentally fair-minded people, that they are looking at my candidacy and every candidacy, not on the candidate's identity, but on their ideas. And my gender identity has never come up in conversations with voters, with very few exceptions. And those few exceptions have either been people with good faith, earnest questions, because they may have read that I'm trans and they just want to understand it more, or frankly, more commonly than that, excitement and celebration of the fact that we could have a more diverse government and a legislature that includes more voices that for hundreds of years have never been included at the table. So this campaign for me has really reinforced the fair-mindedness of people, but it's certainly still a challenge. I think it's a challenge to create my own narrative. I think a lot of people see me as a young trans woman, and those identities come together to create a sort of pre-existing stereotype of maybe who I am and my approach to change making. And I think a lot of folks on this call know that my approach is fundamentally about bringing people together and trying to find solutions that meet the challenges we face, but to recognize that people are coming to that conversation in good faith. People are coming with good motives, to see the dignity in every person, to fight for every person, regardless of whether they vote for me or not. And to recognize that there's a lot that we all have in common. And so creating that narrative or having that narrative heard, despite my identities, which maybe lead people to think that my approach is different. That's certainly been something that I've been intentionally focused on. Try to make clear who I am and to introduce myself to voters who don't know me on my own terms in my own way, not based on anyone's preconceived notions.
I'm not trying to bridge these two, but I am. You said something that just really struck out to me, and that is, yes, we're all looking at the national, but the local is so important. And one thing I will say that I think we have a lot of things in common, but one thing about this alliance that was important to us all from the beginning in June we started is that nationally we're all connected, but locally is where we're going to be consumer interfacing, and we're going to be a resource of growth for the community, right? And so to me, that's what excites me when I wake up every morning thinking about things in this role and what to do with the alliance. That's the difference, and that's the hard work. The national stuff, it's been great and we're all connected, but the local is the hard work, but it's so rewarding, right? And so it's exciting to hear you say those words, because I feel like all of us on this call, we see that, and we're in that position where we can make change locally. Let's focus on that, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I have always tried to reinforce for peers of mine, whether this was when I was in college and a student leader there, whether I'm an advocate here in the community here in Delaware, is a lot of times people understandably get consumed by the shiny object right there, and there is so much happening at the national level, and there's so much to be outraged by at the federal level, and there's also a lot to be excited by in the potential at the federal level. And yet at the same time, we know that most of the issues that we interact with on a daily basis, most of the issues that matter to us, aren't actually handled predominantly at the federal level. They are handled at the state level. When we're talking about criminal justice reform, most of that is done at the state level. When we're talking about infrastructure, a lot of that is done at the state level. When we're talking about public education, that's handled almost exclusively at the state level. Healthcare is a public or is a state and federal partnership in many instances. And so whether it's either a portion of an issue area or all of the issue area, the state has a major role in the decisions that are made and in the policies that are implemented. And local change matters, because one of the things I've seen in my work in the LGBTQ movement is that change doesn't happen and occur, from at the top and then trickle down. Change comes from the bottom up. And, we all know, we've all discussed in many instances passage of the Equality Act, which would be, a landmark nationwide non-discrimination law for our community. That's not going to be the first ever non-discrimination law that passes. And it will only pass because hundreds of cities have already passed these laws, because dozens of states have already passed these laws. We know change comes from the individual communities and the individual states. And if we can change our communities and if we can change our states, then we lay the foundation to change the country.
That's awesome. So, all right, I know this may be out of place, but I'm just so curious. What are your plans for election night? I want to hear, what do you got planned? I know it's a little different with COVID and everything else. What are your plans for election night?
Yeah, it's so sad that we all won't be together in the same way that we usually are. Usually, the Democratic Party has a big party at a hotel in downtown Wilmington, and everyone can get together and celebrate or mourn if that's called for together. That's obviously a lot more challenging in this time, and we have been very intentional as a campaign that we want to put public health first. So we've been very conscious of campaigning and operating in a way that's safe and responsible. We did actually just recently rent out a local brew pub in the heart of my district that has a really great indoor and outdoor area. The indoor area is very open and is pretty much all windows that can be lifted up. So we are gonna have, some of our core volunteers, Phoebe Lucas, who's, I don't know if people are on gallery view, Phoebe Lucas is the person at the bottom who says, "Get out the vote." She's my campaign manager. So we're gonna have the campaign staff, campaign volunteers, my family all together in one place with masks on, socially distancing. And it'll be, hopefully it'll be a great night. We should know results pretty quickly in Delaware. Unlike, many states where we might not know the results at the federal or local level for a matter of days.
Like Florida, where I live.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It's
a given.
Gonna be brutal. Here, we're gonna get the results pretty quickly, fortunately. And as I was saying to you beforehand, the Delaware Constitution, as it's written, results in new state senators taking office. They still get sworn in a ceremonial event in January, but state senators actually take office at midnight on that night. So candidly, I'm probably going to take a shot at midnight.
Right. I think you'll need it, so I think that's really awesome. So you kind of talked about this a little bit, but obviously, Joe Biden, he wrote the foreword to your book. So I don't want to say if he wins, but say he wins, right? Let's hope. What should the LGBTQ community expect from him, in your words?
Yeah, what we can expect is, to put it simply, the most pro-equality president in our nation's history. Awesome. He is someone who is deeply committed to the issues that impact our community, to equality for the LGBTQ community, and to prioritizing the challenges and issues that we face as a community. I've had the pleasure and privilege of knowing Joe Biden my entire life. And that might sound impressive, but considering I'm from Delaware, where everyone's dated, mated, or related to one another, it's a lot less impressive. But I have had the privilege of seeing him up close, of seeing the man up close. I worked for his son, Beau, when he was Attorney General. And Beau was truly the real deal. One of the most compassionate, thoughtful, kind people I've ever met. And I'm sure everyone here knows he passed away from cancer in 2015. Was just, an incredible friend and mentor. But through Kamala, actually, Senator Harris sort of talks about how she got to know Joe through Beau, and in many ways it sort of mirrors my experience. I really got to know Joe Biden through Beau. The love and devotion that Beau had to his father and that his father had to him was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I mean, it's truly the most special father-son relationship I've witnessed. And it's not surprising given the tragedy that that family has gone through together, given the hardship that they've faced together. You know, Joe Biden, they call him Amtrak Joe, not just because he was a fan of the train, but because he quite literally went down to DC every single day. Most senators, they usually get a house in DC, even senators who live not too far from DC. But Joe Biden rode the Amtrak down and back every day so that he could be with his boys.
That's
He could tuck
awesome.
them in at night. He could have
Yeah.
breakfast with them in the morning. And when he was sworn in, he said, they asked, it was right after his wife died, and they asked him, you know, are you gonna stay a senator? And he said, well, in 6 months, I'm gonna have to look at that because Delaware can always get another senator, but my boys can never get a new father. And anyway, so he's just a decent man. And for our community, what I think we should know is that we have never had a nominee who, when given a platform and a national position, has so consistently and publicly embraced our cause and our fight. I mean, he did it as vice president. Obviously, everyone's familiar with his statement on Meet the Press around marriage equality. But I'll tell you, as a trans person, he was the first national politician out there talking about transgender rights publicly and calling it a civil rights issue. After his term as vice president, he created the Biden Foundation. It had 5 pillars. One of those pillars was LGBTQ equality. One of the central pillars of his foundation after he was vice president was specifically LGBTQ equality. And as a candidate, now nominee for president, he has assembled a team of incredible diversity that's included many LGBTQ people, including trans people in senior leadership roles. And he has released the most progressive, detailed pro-equality plan that any nominee has put forward in history. And so I'm incredibly excited to see what he will do for our community, both through executive action to reverse the discriminatory policies of the current administration, but also in pushing and working with Congress to pass the Equality Act and finally sign it into law so that our community is not just explicitly protected under federal civil rights laws, but that we have protections in every area of life, which even after the recent Supreme Court decision is not a reality.
True. I agree. Well, I mean, I think this leads us into my next question for you. You know, as a leading voice in our community, you know, what should we all be doing right now? You know, over the last 2 days, you know, the election, and to ensure that LGBTQ community, you know, can take forward steps and be authentic selves. I mean, obviously, one is this
Yes.
vote. You know, I may try. I had to mail out ballot, but I went there and delivered it myself in the rain. So I want to make sure I had that. But you know, what should we be doing?
Well, obviously, you know, the next 2 weeks are critical for our community. They're critical at the federal level. They're critical at the local level. We have an opportunity this election to elect a record number of LGBTQ people at the state and federal level. And we know that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. The only way for us to make progress as a community is to elect more of our own to public office. Second, it's, you know, find a local race or a state race in your area and make phone calls, spend some time volunteering. If you're interested in volunteering for my campaign, and we can absolutely use the help, we are doing phone banking and people from all across the country are joining us. I'll give you a little plug. This coming Monday, Amy Schumer's joining us to kick off a phone bank.
No way. Oh my gosh. Awesome.
Go to the Mobilize link that Phoebe has put in the chat. You can sign up for any of those phone banks, including one with Amy Schumer, I think is probably there. Although if it's not live on the Mobilize site, maybe Phoebe can put it in there. And so volunteering over the next few days, getting out the vote is critical. And for a lot of people, this is a confusing election to vote in, literally confusing as to how to vote, because for a lot of people in a lot of places, it's new. Here in Delaware, we've never had a real universal vote by mail option like we do now. So people are still figuring out how to vote. And so making those calls for local campaigns, for Joe Biden's campaign, for my campaign, goes a long way in making sure that we get our voters out. Obviously, donating in the home stretch is key. And I'm going to be honest, Joe Biden has a lot of money already, but candidates down ballot can use the support, and your money goes a really long way. $5 at the federal level, $5 out of 300 billion or 300 million that he's raising per month. that's a drop in the bucket. But at the local level, $5 is a huge investment in a local campaign. $10, $20, $30. That makes a huge difference for a state legislative campaign, for a city council campaign. So donate, including, if you're willing, donating to my campaign to get us.
It's posted here, so everybody take note. Take note. We can take some time here while she talks, and make sure that we click on the link to donate, because you're right. I mean, yeah, you're right. If you're voting, donating on a national level, that's great, but it goes even further on a more local level and state level. So I agree. So yeah.
But then the final thing I'll say is that this election is obviously critical. It's critical for our community. I think it's critical for our democracy. But the work doesn't end at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on November 3rd. In fact, that's just the start. Because once we elect pro-equality candidates up and down the ballot, they and we will need you all to push us to adopt pro-equality policies, to adopt inclusive policies,
right,
to deliver on the promises that we make during these campaigns. And so, a lot of people think making phone calls and writing letters to your Congress people or your local legislators doesn't make a difference. And I can tell you they absolutely do make a difference. So when issues come before a legislative body, offer your thoughts, speak out. It helps. It goes a long way, no matter whether you're in a deep blue district, a purple district, or a deep red district.
Well, and that I know we got some questions coming in the chat and everything else, but I've got two more that I want to bring up with you, and one actually goes to what you said. So I literally just reached out to my senators, which I'm like, I'm going to do it, even though I'm not sure how it's going to go. As far as the response, but it's regarding putting off the Supreme Court nomination, as that, and obviously I got some blanket whatever and blah 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 type of stuff. But I did it. I felt empowered that I did that and reached out to my senators and things like that. How concerned are you about the future of our rights when it comes to the Supreme Court?
Deeply concerned. A 6-3 conservative court that let's be clear was packed by Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump when they decided to hold open Justice Scalia's position in order for Donald Trump to fill it for almost a year. It's being packed right now when they're betraying their very rule that they set 4 years ago by rushing through Amy Coney Barrett's nomination. So that 6-3 Republican-packed Supreme Court poses a clear and present danger to our community and, frankly, so many people in this country. And when we're talking about a right to choose, when we're talking about workers' rights, when we're talking about environmental rights, when we're talking about just the access to the ballot box and our sort of democratic institutions, so much is on the line. And what's clear is that the people that the Heritage Foundation and the Alliance Defending Freedom that they're putting forward, that they have on their approved lists that Donald Trump and Mike Pence have picked from, is that these are nominees that aren't approaching these issues like John Roberts said he was an umpire who calls balls and strikes. They are going in with a very clear objective, a very clear policy objective. And that is to undermine rights, roll back progress, and frankly, undermine democratic institutions.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I'm very concerned. The Supreme Court, the conservatives on the Supreme Court have just recently made very clear that they still believe Obergefell was not only wrongly decided, but presents, quote, challenges that the Supreme Court's going to have to deal with. We know the ACA and people's protections for pre-existing conditions are at risk and on the docket just a month or week after the Supreme Court. And what I think for me, this really reinforces, and I'm not giving up on the Supreme Court question in the sense of we should all fight and call our senators and urge them to oppose her nomination and urge them to wait for, whoever wins the election to be able to fill the vacancy. But should that not work, it only reinforces the importance of state legislatures.
That's what I was going to say. Right.
As state legislatures are the safeguard of democracy. They're the layer of government that can protect us from the harm that a Supreme Court can inflict on our community. They can codify protections that aren't yet codified at the state level. They can pass protections for people with pre-existing conditions. They can ensure that LGBTQ people are clearly protected. They can do what we did here in Delaware, which is codify Roe v. Wade, so that if the Supreme Court overturns a right to an abortion, that state level governments can codify that at their level, and so that everyone can still access reproductive health care. So it only reinforces the importance of local and state elected officials.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I've got some other things, but I know we're getting some questions as far as, the nominee, Supreme Court nominee, Barrett, and do you feel we should be bracing for an attack on LGBT rights if she is, approved or whatever and confirmed, should I say? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think she presents a very real risk to our community. I mean, she can't objectively read the law if she does not believe that being LGBTQ is a real identity. She cannot objectively interpret the law if she doesn't believe that a peaceful transfer of power is a constitutional imperative. She cannot objectively interpret the law if she does not accept the scientific consensus of climate change. I mean, you have to have a base level of understanding in order for us to have any faith that someone can objectively interpret the law. And she has, in particular on LGBTQ equality, demonstrated that not only is she hostile to the legal arguments, she is hostile to the very dignity of our humanity and hostile to the validity of our identities.
Yeah, and I think she was trustee at a private school or something like that, where they were effectively, barred admission to children of same-sex parents and things like that. And so, she's obviously got a history, of that behavior.
And if that type of, one of the things it reinforces is, for as far as we've come, we still have a long way to go. Because the fact that she could serve on the board of an entity that has blatant and explicit discriminatory policies, that is not automatically disqualifying, reinforces that in too many instances, anti-LGBTQ bigotry is still considered a mainstream position. That it's still a reasonable difference of opinion about whether you treat LGBTQ people with respect and fairness. And to me, that reinforces the work we have ahead of us, because it should be disqualifying. And we have to build a world where no one can get nominated to the Supreme Court who has such a clear bigotry and prejudice toward our community.
Well, I mean, and I hope you and everyone else will take this the right way, but actually you gave me, I think you gave us all some comfort in saying that, even if she were to get, that position or confirmed, we have power as far as within the state level too, right? And so we really probably, what I take away from this conversation outside of just hearing you speak and your campaign trail and your passion for this and making change and more about your community in Wilmington, is that we have a voice, and we need to, it's not just on a national level. In fact, it could be more impactful on a state level, right? And so that is my biggest takeaway. So thanking you. I'm actually a little bit better. I can sleep a little bit better tonight,
I'm fired up, and the stakes are obviously high at the federal level, but we really have an incredible opportunity in our communities and our states to not just defend ourselves against whatever harm can come our way at the federal level, whether it's Donald Trump getting reelected, or even if Joe Biden gets elected, an even more conservative Supreme Court. We don't only have the opportunity to protect ourselves from that, but we have the opportunity at the state level to move the ball forward, to continue to move equality forward, and to continue to do what we've always done, which is, even in the face of prejudice, even in the face of government-sanctioned discrimination, we have fought back, we have opened hearts and changed minds, and we've moved equality forward. And it doesn't matter who is president when it comes to our individual capacity to lay the foundation for long-term progress. And the final thing I'll say is, it's easy to be dispirited from this moment. It is easy to feel like we're so divided that we can't do big things, that our government can't work anymore. And for me, one of the things that I find the greatest amount of comfort in is frankly reading history, and not just reading about the progress of history, but specifically the moments of maximum crisis. Who would have thought that we'd be able to get through in the height of the Civil War? Who would have thought that we'd be able to not only survive that, but that it would result in the abolition of slavery, particularly in the first half? Who would have thought in the depths of the Great Depression that it would have resulted in our country taking our biggest step forward and creating a social safety net that literally lifted millions out of poverty? Who would have thought, crossing that bridge in Selma, that the sacrifice of people like John Lewis and Martin Luther King would have not just resulted in a Voting Rights Act within a year, a housing Civil Rights Act 4 years later, but in the long run, our nation's first Black president. It is always in our moments of significant challenges and unprecedented crisis that we take our biggest steps forward. And what Barack Obama said at the Democratic Convention, I think, is the truest statement, that for as difficult as this moment is, for as high as the stakes are, for as depressing as the news can be, if anyone could give up on our democracy, it was them. It was the people who faced even greater odds and even bigger challenges. And if they were able to face those head on and not only get through them, but transform the country, get it while doing so, then we can certainly do the same thing.
Well, I mean, I think you put it, and I do want to elaborate on something. Just it gets me thinking in the LGBTQ world. I mean, you look at, I mean, it's something as some of you may not know this, but really, Stonewall, the LGBTQ community was upset about Judy Garland's death, right? And look who that got started by, and a transgender person kind of started that movement there, and look at all the pride festivals and everything else that came about that. And then you look during the AIDS crisis, right? I mean, it's horrific. And, I know a lot of us have experienced that, and especially at a certain age, but, will we be where we are if we didn't have that? If the ACT UPs of the world and things like that, and will we have that, right? So the Phoenix Rising, right?
Exactly. That is exactly right, John. I mean, that's the story of our community. It's through the flames of riots that a movement was born. It was in the loss of a modern epidemic that our contemporary movement structures were created. You're absolutely right, and we are reminded that hope only makes sense as an emotion in the face of hardship, and that's the story of our community. It's the story of our movement. It's the story of this country, and hopefully, it'll be the story of our chapter.
Yeah, I mean, so I got a question I want to throw you away that we've got in our chat box, and it says if. I want to say when the Dems win back the Senate, is the passage of the Equality Act likely to happen in your viewpoint?
I do believe that it's likely. I mean, it will still face challenges. I think some of it depends on what happens with the filibuster, quite candidly. But even with the filibuster, I still think there's a path toward passage, because I do think, depending on how many seats the Democrats win, that there is room for us to get enough Republicans voting in favor of the legislation, particularly if it comes to the floor, right? The big question here is whether the bill comes to the floor. And that is the biggest thing Democrats winning control of the Senate will do, is it'll allow us to control the floor schedule and allow the bill to be brought to the floor. And if it's brought to the floor, I do believe that even if there's the filibuster, we can get enough Republican senators to vote for ending debate, for cloture, and for the bill that we would need to reach 60. It's already passed the House of Representatives. It passed with a bipartisan margin. And obviously, Joe Biden has made clear it's a priority for him and that he is eager to sign it when it reaches his desk. So I do think that there's a very, very real path toward passage if we win the Senate and if we win the presidency. And I'm incredibly excited. I mean, the Equality Act is a piece of legislation that's near and dear to my heart, not just as an LGBTQ person, but as an advocate. I was part of the conversations in the movement when we moved away from ENDA toward the comprehensive legislation. I was at the table when we were sort of negotiating the piece of legislation with other civil rights movements and leaders. And so seeing the bill come from an idea in 2014 and 2015 to the potential of it being the law of the land and the most significant step forward legislatively that we've ever taken. I mean, it's really incredible. And for that to potentially only be a 6-year journey, a 7-year journey, God willing, is actually a really exceptionally fast rate of change.
Well, and I've got a question here. I'm going to have to read it from the chat, but I'm interested in your insight as well as too. So forgive me for kind of reading here a bit. Just say, this is from Ryan. There's a mom or dad with a little boy or girl who doesn't feel like everything is right with who they are, that something isn't adding up. You're a role model for those kids and their parents. What do you say to those kids or parents in taking the next steps down the road of life?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. And, you know, the best thing about the work that I've had the opportunity to do is getting to meet young transgender people and the family members that love them. You know, the first thing I say when I meet a parent who's who's thinking that their child might be LGBTQ, or if their child has just recently come out, or frankly, if they haven't recently come out. But I thank them for loving their child, and they always say, "Oh, of course." And I'm like, "Well, it should go without saying, but it doesn't." And I want you to know how much I appreciate the fact that you love your child in a way where they feel comfortable sharing who they are with you, because that's not the reality for a lot of kids. The second is to really take your cues from your child. I think a lot of times a parent might start to suspect something and they want to go and say, "Hey, if you're gay or if you're trans, I love you." But sometimes forcing the question before the person's ready can actually be counterproductive and harmful. So really letting your child dictate the terms and the timeline of whatever journey they're on is really key. I always say if a parent is thinking their child might be trans, one of the things they can do is they can go, "Oh, you know what? I use myself. I say, one of the things you can say is, you just heard this awesome transgender person speak. You learned so much. I can't understand why anyone would reject transgender people and, not support and celebrate them." And that's just a nice sort of non-threatening way of making clear where your heart is and what the young person can expect should they come out. If they do come out, I was just saying, if they do come out, I think the first thing to do is to find support.
Well, and I take that. I'm glad that that question was posed, because, and I know we're kind of running on time here, but we see this alliance as, I was just asked in an interview, you guys have got so many initiatives and it's new, and I'm like, it's not new. We're just maybe getting bolder and putting it on the table, but I think more than anything else, we are consumer facing. That's the whole mission of this, is the consumer facing, to uplift our communities. That's growth to us. So the fact that you answered that question so eloquently and just very, I needed to know that just personally, and I think we all did on this, because, all of us with the Alliance, we're leaders in our communities, right? And so, especially in the LGBTQ plus, community, we're probably going to be asked that. So I am glad, I like the way you articulated that, because we should be able to answer those questions, because people may reach out to us in our communities, right, around the whole country. And so that's really, I like the way you voiced that.
Well, and it's one of the most challenging questions, because everyone's circumstance is different. And for me, there's no clear 1, 2, 3 step I can give people. What I can give people sort of the guardrails, the bumper bowling version of navigating this. And I think if you have those guardrails, it makes it a lot easier, and it allows people to navigate it, whatever that specific path and journey looks like, navigate it the right way, and with love and support and compassion and understanding, but also in a way that's not, unintentionally harming anyone.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, you know what? I'm going to kind of bring the big close here. So what can we do to help the highest ranking transgender person in history of our nation?
Well, that is incredibly incredibly kind of you to even ask. like I said, we're in the home stretch of this campaign. And what we need is either time or resources, whether that's financial support or volunteering. Right now is the key period. Every time is always the most important asset a campaign can have. And the closer you get to election, the more that increases, right? The more every hour, every minute matters. And so any 30 minutes, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours that people can spare at this point, it's the best use of your time at any point for this campaign. It's the best bang for your buck time-wise. Any donation you can provide to this campaign will go a long way in making sure that we get our message out there. I'm going to be candid. While I'm favored to win, I'm facing a Republican opponent whose favorite topic is not the issues we face, it's my identity. And he has begun collaborating with the U.S. Senate nominee in our state, who you may have seen national news about because she has defended the Proud Boys, an SPLC designated hate group. She's called for a total moratorium on immigration and the immediate deportation of all immigrants in our country. She has colluded with neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and monarchists. And he has put his lot in with her. And so we are facing really the worst underbelly of the Delaware Republican Party, which at this point is just the Trump Republican Party.
Yeah.
And so we need resources, we need help to make sure that we can get our positive, issues-focused message out there to the residents of this district.
So I don't know if I heard correctly, but did whoever donates the most time or the most money on this session to your campaign, they'll get a personal video call from Amy Schumer? Is that what you said? It's a great idea, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's not real. We're just having a little fun here, right?
There is a cap on what people $600 is about as
so that was me being funny, everybody.
Like I said, all you have to do is volunteer on Monday to get to join a Zoom call.
There you have it. There's your chance, right? Well, listen, I know it's this is very valuable time as we get into the home stretch for your campaign, but I wanted to thank you for this very insightful conversation, and I really just thank you so much. And I know you're going to do, you're a trailblazer, right? And so you've done so much for our communities, and not only your community, but it's been throughout, right, the whole country, and totally supportive. So I know I'm going to get to your site and do what I can to donate as well too. So thank you. It was so good to see you, Sarah. And I'm going to hand it over to Ryan if he has any closing comments to say. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for your leadership, and Ryan for your leadership, David for your leadership and work as well. I just want to say before Ryan closes us out, thank you for everyone for joining us. It's always great to be with my Alliance family. You all are doing such incredible work to not only make your profession more inclusive of LGBTQ people, but to expand access to the American dream of home ownership to LGBTQ home buyers and renters and our families. So thank you very much.
Well, Sarah, I'm not going to let you get off the hook that easy. There's one question that I have for you, and it's actually aimed at a segment that we're kicking off over the next 2 weeks. We're going to be dropping videos from various folks like yourself, influential figures in the community. And the question that I'd like you to answer, just a minute or two, why does this election cycle matter to the trans community, Sarah?
This election is critical to the trans community because our rights, our health, our dignity, and our lives are on the line. Our democracy is at stake in this election. Our ability to advocate for ourselves, to vote in our interests, and to adopt the kinds of policies that our community needs to live and thrive, that will all be impacted by the results of the election, not just at the top of the ticket, but all the way down. And so it is critical that on November 3rd, across this country, we elect pro-equality candidates up and down the ballot who will not just give lip service to our community, who will not just promise to deliver results, but who will deliver real and meaningful change for the trans community at a time when we've never needed it more.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, again, going with what John just said, thank you, Sarah. We love having you with us. You're a friend of the organization. You're a friend of the community. You're an admirable figure. I personally look up to you in my leadership capacity. What we've done here tonight, folks, is set the stage to hopefully help motivate you to get out to the polls. And over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be having folks such as Sarah, who actually started us off this evening, our friend Jonathan Lovitz from the NGLCC, Siobhan Ferguson from the National Fair Housing Alliance. We've reached out working with Stuart Milk of the Harvey Milk Foundation, and David Stacy of the HRC. We're going to be giving folks various capacity information on why voting in any specific factor of life is important to this election. So join us over the next few weeks as we explore those dialogues. Feel free to continue to tune in as you see us go live. Thank you again to our dear friend, Sarah McBride. As a 501c6, I just want to reemphasize that we have the ability to endorse positions and candidates, and the Alliance is proud to endorse Sarah McBride and her candidacy for Delaware State Senate. If you do have the capacity and the interest, do feel free to check out her website and join us in that endorsement. Otherwise, we thank you for your time this evening. Thank you to John. Thank you to Phoebe and David who've been on the line. And Sarah, again, you're a beautiful human, and I can't wait to watch what you do for this country.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be with you all and see you all.
Have a good night, folks.
Thank you. Bye.